So welcome everyone to the What's New in LabVIEW session. It's great to be back here after a couple-year hiatus. It's great to see a full room here too. So this is really exciting and motivating to, working on products for a couple of years and, not getting to personally connect and share those is, I'm excited to get back to that again. So What's New session, my name's Deb Burke. I'm on the software product management team. I've been at NI 11 years, largely working on LabVIEW, real-time, and FPGA. I'm joined by Kiran today.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So I'm Kiran Nagaraj. I'm the product manager for LabVIEW as well. I've been with NI for about 9 years. I've worked in Vision, Compact Trio, and now in LabVIEW.
Great, so we're going to share today what's new in LabVIEW, specifically 2022. Let me get calibrated here. 2022 Q3. So for agenda today, first we're going to give a little bit of overview of NI's updating our software versioning to be consistent across every product and align that across what quarters we're releasing as we release software more regularly. So we'll get into that. Of course, as usual, feel free to ask questions as we go. We've got a large number of our R&D team and some of our marketing team in the back, so we hope to address questions during the session. And if we get done early, feel free to stay afterwards, and we can form some lines up in the front and address questions. And if we don't get them all today, hopefully we can sync up later in the week, or there's an e-business card setting in the NI Connect app that we can be sure to get your email and follow up afterwards. So we'll touch on the software versioning. We'll touch on kind of three key themes of investment around software management, interoperability with other languages and environments, and then a quick overview of what's new in RT and FPGA. And then we'll give a quick browse of the public-facing roadmap. So as we're looking to release more regularly twice a year with major versions, we want to be sure to give you a preview of what's coming up, and we'll be updating that with every release as well, posted on the forums. And then lastly, we'll go through a few additional resources of what's new there. Okay, great. So first to jump in, we're updating our software versioning. You'll see this beginning in Q3. So what was talked about on the keynote stage, the next software release will be end of July, around Q3 timeframe. So the mechanism will be product, version, and then quarter. So you can align, what driver is correlating with your LabVIEW version. So the next one we'll be focusing on today is LabVIEW 2022 Q3. 2022 Q3, and then the next major release of LabVIEW will be LabVIEW 2023 Q1. So we'll be moving away from the service pack naming methodology just to make it clear when the releases are coming out, and kind of removing the arbitrary restriction we had on putting new features in that SP1 version. So this way, as we're releasing more regularly twice a year with LabVIEW and Test Stand, and some of our products also release quarterly, we can put new functionality, new features in that, and then you can assess, if you want to test and upgrade to that new version. Now, one of the restrictions that was kind of keeping us from doing that twice a year release was we know it would be onerous to update drivers twice a year along with that too. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about here in project management, or how you are, upgrading, managing the development of your LabVIEW projects and uptaking new functionality. One of the first pain points that we wanted to address is that upgrade process. So today, when you upgrade version of LabVIEW for your hardware systems, you also are updating the version of drivers, right? And keeping track of, the 2020.5 versus .7. There's a lot of unnecessary baggage that you have to maintain there, let alone if you need to revalidate the system with that. So with this release, we'll be moving select drivers to decouple from that hard locking with the LabVIEW version. So today we've got a few out there, FGen, and then a few more will come with the LabVIEW 2023 release. And by the end of the year, moving into the LabVIEW 2023 Q1 release, we anticipate a majority of our drivers will be moved to installing into a version agnostic location. So that when you install your version of LabVIEW, I'll walk through the example on the left here. So today, install LabVIEW 2020 and the drivers to go along with it. And then if I install LabVIEW 2021, because I want to upgrade either to get new functionality or uptake, some new code that I saw in the community. Today, you have to upgrade all your drivers. Now with LabVIEW 2022 Q3, sorry about that. LabVIEW 2022 Q3, I can install my drivers along with that. And then when I upgrade next to LabVIEW 2023 Q, whatever version, sorry about that again. You do not have to upgrade your drivers at that point. Unless there's explicitly a new hardware model that's coming out with that new functionality, you can continue to use new versions of LabVIEW without upgrading drivers. So hoping to make that workflow a little bit easier. Okay, the next new thing I want to talk about is making the LabVIEW compare functionality available in all versions. So whether you're using base, full, or pro, we know that it's important to be using the compare tool as you're co-developing or just working on your own code. So before that was only available in pro, we're just pulling that into all versions to be sure that you can make use of that. So where you enter that is within the tools menu. You're comparing code, you select what VIs you want to look at, and then you can enter into the workflow where you're going between either functional or cosmetic changes, and right within that window you can switch between what comparisons you want to see highlighted in the tool. So that's available whether you're using base, full, or pro. So take a look at that. If you're not using that today, it can be handy as you're going through development cycles, whether you can see changes you made that you might not remember from weeks or months ago, or a colleague made. Okay, I'm going to hand off to Kiran to talk through some of the updates to interoperability with other languages.
All right. Thanks, Deb. So regarding interoperability, we realize that whenever you build your test systems, it's usually heterogeneous in nature. It could be because of the various tools you're using or different languages what you plan to use. So in order to keep up with this and make sure LabVIEW works seamlessly with all of the tools, we have decided to focus on certain tools such as MathWorks, MATLAB, Python, C#, and .NET. So let's look at what's new in terms of the MATLAB offering. So as many of you know, sorry, there's a question? Okay. Is it better? How about now? I think there's going to be a, sorry.
Here, just put the wireless here. Sorry, we're also recording in the back for sharing virtually afterwards, so we got a couple different mics going.
I think there'll still be a. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's put the wireless one on. While he's getting that fixed up, were there any questions on the project management session or some of the updates we're making to versioning, especially with our software drivers? Okay. If you have specific scenarios you want to talk through for your upgrade, we can cover that at the end as well. Yeah.
If we have very old version, like we are operating in 2015 or 2014, is available to go straight to 2022 or?
Well, moving multiple versions like that, there's always some extra testing involved, but you can move to 2022, and then when you upgrade to the driver versions, then it'll install to that versionless location, and then moving forward, you won't need to upgrade your drivers every time explicitly. So you do have to get to 2022 Q3 or 2023 Q1 first to install the version of the drivers that is using this LV add-on approach versus instead of a specific version location, and then you can move forward.
So I should install 2022 Q1 first.
Sorry, excuse me, Q3. Sorry about that. Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. So can you hear me now? Is it better? Okay, perfect. All right, with respect to the MATLAB node, as many of you know that in 2021, we moved away from the MATLAB script node, which generally customers would be using, where you had to copy the contents of the .m file and then literally paste it into the MATLAB node and then execute things. So instead, we went with the approach what we had similarly followed for Python, which is about the nodes. You have the open session, run session, and close session. So we added the capability of choosing a specific version of MATLAB node, and then you would be able to execute just the .m files or the .mat files directly from LabVIEW. This year, we are adding more capabilities in terms of debugging. If you need to debug your MATLAB, the .m files or the .mat files, then that's added in this version. Going ahead, we would like to improve some of the load times, specifically for the MATLAB applications, related applications. You could either be using the .NET or a DLL based approach, and we would improve those load times. All right. Specific to the debug side of things, and most importantly, you'll now be able to open the .m file by having a right click on the run node. As you can see, you'll have the options of open in MATLAB, and then a version would be selected. If you have multiple MATLAB versions on your system, then all of them would be displayed. If not, whatever is the last installed version, that will show up. On the debugging side, it's very similar to that. You would go ahead now, right click on the run node, open the .m file, then add the breakpoints in the .m file in the MATLAB IDE, and you will be able to go step by step. Let me just show you a demo on how that would work. As you see that I've added a breakpoint on the MATLAB run node, and now I step into it. You would see the IDE opened, and you can step into several lines of the MATLAB code. And you can also have a couple of MATLAB run nodes itself installed, so that you could call into multiple .m files and then do the same process there. All right, the other information which I wanted to share with all of you is that the MathScript node is getting deprecated in 2023. So people who are not familiar with the MathScript module, this is how it would look. It has similar coding style as that of a .m or a MATLAB node. And then you would configure the inputs and the outputs here, what you see here. So the migration or the path of migration for this is to make use of the MATLAB node itself. And you would see that the same code is now sort of moved to a .m file, but having a function. So this is mainly because we want to stop the MathScript node and move into a MATLAB node where you have consistent way of coding and executing things. And we will further continue to invest in making the MATLAB nodes better. So this would be the right path if you are exploring this area. Now let's talk about the Python nodes. Again, we have been supporting Python nodes for quite some time now. In 2021 release, we stopped supporting the Python 2.7, and then we moved to 3.6, 3.7 till 3.9. And the other feature what we added was to enable the call of Python when you do a custom installation. So let's say you don't want to do it in the program files and then Python folder, rather you want to have it in a different drive or a different folder in the same drive, then you can definitely go ahead and do that. So this demo is actually set up in our experience launch. So if you want to have a look at it, play around with it, feel free to do. In 22 Q3, what we have added is the support of Python classes. And then let's just look at how that would be useful. As you can see, the code on the left, you will there's a new red box which is added, like the Python object. And the good part about this Python object is that you could call into several Python run functions, and then you would be able to run several Python functions on the same object. So that would be the useful feature what we have tried to add, because this is some we have had several customer requests coming in this direction, and we thought this would enable you to do a lot more things. Any questions so far? Yes, please.
On the MATLAB
Okay.
node, support RT that comes.
So the question is the MATLAB node supported on RT? Okay. So right now there is no direct support, especially on NI Linux RT. I'm not talking about the Linux desktop systems, but on NI Linux RT, there's no direct support. But what you could possibly be doing is once you have your MATLAB code created on the Windows side, you could use something called as the MATLAB coder and then take it to NI Linux RT as a .so file. Eric, you want to add something?
Kiran, there's a white paper on our website that talks about the process to go through so you can do deployments, build executables and deployments.
Yeah, that's true. There's a white paper as well. And just to add to what Eric is saying, I think I missed that point. Even during our math script to MATLAB node migration, from 22 Q3, we are planning to add a couple of white papers. The first one would be specific to Windows only, what the migration path would be like. And then on the RT using MATLAB coder, there would be like sequence of steps, what you need to follow when you actually need to move to the NI Linux RT. Yes, please.
There's a similar structure called the formula node that looks like the MATLAB node. There's no intention to remove that one, right?
Yeah, so there's no intention of removing the formula.
The
Just repeat
formula
the question.
node looks just like the MATLAB node, but doesn't require MATLAB. Just want to make sure that that's not being removed.
Correct.
Eric, did you get it?
That's correct. We're not removing the formula node. That's
The formula node looks similar to that of MATLAB node, so are we planning to remove it? So the answer is no. Okay. All right. All right. Yes, please.
Do you have any support or integration for the MATLAB engine, like connecting to a MATLAB engine shared session?
So the question is, are there any support to connect to MATLAB engine? So when you say MATLAB engine, are you referring to the MATLAB IDE?
No, there's the MATLAB engine where I think 2020, actually before that. I'm not really sure when it came out, but there's a MATLAB engine to connect to a session. It's like in 2020B, I think they did away with their API. So now to connect to systems that are running, there's a MATLAB engine.
I see. We could take this question offline, but right now the way we have provided the notes is such that you actually open sessions to MATLAB and then try to execute. Underneath, it's still calling it to MATLAB engine, but maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly. So we could definitely have an offline discussion.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Okay, I'll move forward. So the next feature which I want to talk about is the NI remote ability. So that's like a software capability what we are trying to add so that you can access and control NI instrumentation or the hardware by just making remote procedure calls. And this would only be successful if we try to keep it OS agnostic. So as you can see, we have definitely tried to support Windows, Mac and Linux. So let's see how we are actually trying to accomplish this. So underneath, we want to call the Google remote procedure call, the gRPC. So if you see, once we have the NI instruments, you necessarily need to install the drivers to talk to this. So that would all be installed on the LabVIEW gRPC server. And then over a network by making the remote procedure calls, there could be several clients which are connected to it. And none of these clients require the drivers to be installed on their own system. So that's the advantage what you get when you use the gRPC, and you could have like n number of clients still talking to the server. But do keep in mind that the hardware is one. So we'll have to ensure that there's no conflict when you are accessing the hardware. But as long as the calls are written in a way that you would be able to access the NI instrumentation comfortably using gRPC. All right. So what we are doing as part of the LabVIEW 2022 Q3 offering is that we have come out with a NIPM kind of package wherein there are certain VIs which you can call. And once you run these VIs by giving the necessary fields, setting the path of where you want to create the project and the files and the protobuf file, this does it for you automatically. It also creates Python scripts underneath so that even on the client side, there is minimal like a framework which is already created for you, and then you can interact with it. Sorry. Yeah. So as you see, it's going to be part of the VI PM package, and it will be on the NI Tools network. Currently, you can definitely go look at our GitHub, and this project is definitely there. And the initial release, I just want to let you know, it will be supported only on Windows, not on NI Linux RT. So if you want to understand more, Chris Sifra, who is standing at the back, he has a session tomorrow, this afternoon, from 2:30 to 3:15, where he's going to talk a lot more about the gRPC. All right. So let's talk about the real-time and FPGA modules. So even for the real-time, we did a base offering of the 64-bit real-time last year. There was like a base support where PXI instruments, you would be able to access it. There was also scan engine support. But then this year we decided to add a lot more features so that there's more parity with our 32-bit offering. So keeping that in mind, we have the watchdog timers added and the Modbus API along with NITrace viewers. So this is all part of the 22 Q3. I do want to let you know that the compact Rio drivers will not be available for the 22 Q3 release, but it will be available sometime more like the end of year. So once that is there, I think we are going to offer a lot more hardware that you can access with the 64-bit real-time. To all of our academic friends, just wanted to let you know that the Elvis 3 and MyRio will now have the LabVIEW 2021 support, and this will come out in H2 of 22. All right. On the LabVIEW FPGA side, the primary feature what we are trying to release is we are upgrading of the Vivado compile tool. So we have been on this tool for almost like 2 years or so. So we have finally decided to move to Vivado 2021.1. There are like definitely great features when you just move to this new compilation tool. The quality of the result, the quality of results which come out of this is really good. And then they have these new timing driven optimizations so that your combinational logic is much smaller, and then you achieve better timing with this. So this is all because of the tool itself. This is not something what LabVIEW FPGA is doing. It's more from the Vivado upgrade. So our recommendation is that any of the newer families of FPGA, like the UltraScale and UltraScale Plus, if those are the targets which you are using, be it you can find it on our USRPs and PXIs, then the Vivado 2021.1 would be a good recommendation. If you are still using the compact Rio, then 2019.1 will just serve the purpose. And also with LabVIEW 22 Q3 FPGA release, compact Rio support will not be actually done. It will come more at the end of the year. But as I told you, if it's a newer FPGA, then this 21.1 makes more sense. All right. Deb, do you want to talk about the roadmap? Yeah. Any questions on any of the topics so far?
So does that mean that your FPGA compilation time will go down?
So the question is, does it mean with the new upgrade, will the compilation time goes down? It's very debatable. Meaning this is again something which Xilinx. It's not dependent on the Xilinx compiler, right? But some of the results, what we see when we have run pretty complex designs, especially having a lot of DSPs and things like that, we have seen decrease in it. But then again, you'll have to try out your design to be really sure whether it comes down. And we have also, again, just to add, not just the compilation time, but even the timing improvements we were able to see in a couple of our complex designs.
I have a question. So regarding NI remoteability, you mentioned that gRPC is going to be used. So when you say gRPC, does that mean the actual instruments like the PXI chassis, I can remote into that from anywhere using any language? Or is it just the software like LabVIEW test and
Great question.
Yeah. So the question is, can we access like the PXI hardware using the gRPC calls, right? So the answer is yes, because so what we are trying to do is the drivers, right, which talks to PXI would be installed on the server. And then you would create a gRPC remote procedure calls on the client side and then interact with the server to get access to that hardware.
okay, so that's completely bypassing LabVIEW.
It could.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, yes. Sorry?
I can add in.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah, so with gRPC, again, the goal is, as we all move to more remote test systems, having to access that, especially due to COVID, driving that around the world, that either, we wanted to provide a solution that you could build a LabVIEW server or client, and that's what we want to talk about here. In Chris Siffer's session, he'll talk a little bit more about if you just use the gRPC driver for our hardware, how you then could create a server or client in also any number of languages that are supported today. So the base, like the lowest level driver functionality, that's also available on GitHub today. The LabVIEW server capability, that's on GitHub, but we'll be moving that to be more officially supported out of VIPM. And then LabVIEW client support will be coming in a future release. And then also you'll start seeing more of NI products also adopting gRPC under the hood for doing remote access. Like Testan, for example, is moving away from their COM API to something more like gRPC under the hood. So we've seen a lot of our customers starting to adopt this, and we want to provide that to you as quickly as we can. Great question. Okay, anything else on the previous section at all, RTFPGA? Okay, great. So with LabVIEW 2022 Q3, the dev team is still working on it. So we still have a month and a half in that dev cycle. So again, you'll see that release. Oh, thank you. You'll see that release coming at the end of July, early August, sometime in there, available for download. But again, as we move to twice a year releases, we want to start posting a public roadmap so that you can better plan ahead for what's coming. And hey, I want to target this next release. So 2022 Q3, for example, is adding Windows 11 support. So if that's the next milestone that you want to hit and updating your test systems to be more future-proof, looking at Windows 11 support, that might be exactly what you're targeting. So we're trying to provide you a little bit more heads up on that. So on the public-facing roadmap, you'll see this if you search the LabVIEW forums today. We've kind of categorized it by these same themes of investment. So project management, we talked about a couple of them today, like including the source code tool in all versions, as well as then interoperability. Kiran touched on some of the areas around the Python node. So you can also see a few here we didn't talk about today that are either checked for, okay, they're not coming this next release, but the release after that, the next 1 year to 18 months is kind of what we're looking at. And then future versions are wanting to give you a heads up that this is something we're exploring or looking at in R&D now, but it just might not make its way into the release until the next year, 18 months, somewhere along that time frame. But if you're interested in, hey, I see up here, calling .NET 5 or later .NET assemblies. I want to see that, as soon as possible. For example, please come up and talk to us because we're looking from the development team. We want to start talking to some customers that we can be working with you in the design process for that new version release. So any questions on what you see up here? I can touch on that. Okay, and this is not all inclusive. These are just the main things we've been hearing from customers. There's also the idea exchange, for example. That's another source of input that we take, but they're usually smaller features or functionality that might not make this table.
Will you speak to the top bullet improvements to workflows and source code control tools? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so specifically, we've been targeting more on the Git workflows that we've been seeing customers adopt more and more over the last few years, moving away from other tools. So using Git, even with RT and FPGA systems, is the main areas we've been getting feedback of how do you manage and sharing code across systems there. So parts of the workflow might be more native integration so that when you're doing pull requests, how can I visualize the changes that happen and include that in the pull requests? How can I do code reviews with my colleagues more easily in LabVIEW, rather than having to, maybe remoting into a machine? Are there other approaches we can take? So this one is still, we're looking at the whole workflow, so I don't have anything specific I can talk to here, but we want to hear your feedback if there's specific challenges that you can talk through. Hey, when I sit down with my colleague on a remote call, on the other side of the globe, those are the conversations we'd like to have. Another one here on project dependency management I'll talk to. The dev team's working right now on a viewer. So you open a project today, hey, I don't have the right driver installed. I might not realize that till I double click on my VI and then I get the question mark and I need to go search that down. We want to look at a project level and provide you, hey, here's the drivers that are required. Here you can go into NIPM and we'll start moving towards automating that for you to get up and running with your projects more quickly. So that's another thing that's not in the 2022 Q3 version, but we're working on now and hope to have that ready for early next year.
Can you talk about the Python running in virtual environments?
Yeah, so Python running in virtual environments. Again, today, Kiran showed the Python node where you're kind of specifically looking at an instance. Lots of requests for running Anaconda, for example, or other environments so that you can set up the Python node, but instead of pointing to specific Python exe instance, you can point it to the virtual environment instead. So that's something that if you're using that today, please come up and talk to us. We want to be sure to capture the requirements or what versions and environments you're using. Okay, and if there's anything not on this list that you're also curious about, also please come up and talk to us. We want to be sure to be capturing what's interesting for your projects and we'll help you be more productive. Okay, the other kind of themes of investment that we're working on here at the R&D team. So system support, I mentioned Windows 11, that'll be checked with LabVIEW 2022 Q3. We're also working on support for M1 devices. Kiran talked about completing some of our 64-bit support for RT and FPGA. Another area is around data communication. So we're starting to hear some rumblings about customer sites moving to IPv6, based on when your IT department wants to make that transition, but not super strong yet. But if your company is seeing that, please come let us know. We're trying to figure out the right time to stage that in, get ahead of that. And then UI improvements is another area that we know, within LabVIEW, we want to help you make more modern UIs for your clients and customers, either within your company or other developers that you're building for or potentially contracting for. So another area we'll be working on later this year is supporting Unicode so that you can have one or multiple languages potentially on the same UI. That's something that we know you've been asking for. Also a native data grid control, the ability to create controls at runtime is another common request we've heard. And then lastly, high resolution monitors. That's another area that without Zoom, we want to be sure that we can better support that, either your work from home or in the office setups on different monitors. Okay, any questions on this section of the roadmap? Eric in the back.
In your reference post at the end, do you have the link to the public forum where we have this posted?
If it's not in there, we'll be sure to add it in.
My question for the audience is, if you haven't already viewed this on our website, we encourage you to go there and add commentary to it. To Deb's point of, if there are things you want to see in this roadmap that you're not seeing, if there's things you want to help us prioritize,
What is the, you mentioned introducing the data grid control. What is that?
So in order to view, multiple lists of data today, there's different controls that people have been trying to use in order to select different rows and cells to kind of work around not having a more native data grid. So there's something in the G web development software, kind of an initial data grid there if you wanted to take a look at that, potentially for building remote UIs, but there's nothing yet natively for desktop UIs.
Was that question, what is a data grid?
Yeah, sorry, the question was what do we mean by a data grid on here? What can or can't you do today? Okay, any other questions?
When you mentioned zooming in for LabVIEW IPTs, right, the last point, do you mean like actually zooming into the project and seeing the modules as like bigger, like to the expanding size, or would it remain just the same?
Sorry, there's a question around Zoom and what I meant by the improving the experience on high resolution monitors. So what I meant was without Zoom today, we know we don't have it, we know it's a request, we are doing some research in that area, but this is just the ability to have your IDE look better on high resolution monitors. We know that it's hard, the nodes are showing up fairly small on high resolution monitors. Okay, some additional resources here. So if you want to look at the beta today, it is public out there. Again, the actual release will be towards the end of July. We have a new online help experience. So we're moving away from the .chm files that load with the LabVIEW help into something that is a little bit more modern and can be viewed in the browser. So we have initial support launched last week for LabVIEW 2021 that you can check that out at ni.com/docs. Also, we will be having a feedback session later today. So if that's something you want to look at in person and play around with, please come up afterwards and let me know, and I'll get you connected to our product documentation team that is spearheading those efforts. So we're starting with LabVIEW just because of the hundreds of thousands of users there, and we'll be slowly updating our other products like test stand and drivers to all be available in this one product documentation portal. So excited about that. Also, we've recently updated some of our courses, not just Core 1 and 2, there's a few other ones. I think building advanced architectures. We're also looking at updating the object-oriented programming course and providing more options to self-serve and kind of the virtual instructor-led training, again, kind of spearheaded by the pandemic, wanting to provide more ways to get training in a remote environment. So if you have questions of how at my enterprise agreement can I leverage training, what options are there, or how can I get access to this online, come up and talk to us afterwards.
Question?
Yeah.
Will context help be transitioning to this more web-based documentation?
Question, I might ask someone in the back. Christina, will context help also be part of the documentation migration?
Context help will still be in the product.
Right, but when you click the link, like detailed help.
The detailed link from context help will take you to the online documentation.
Okay, thank you. The question was the new ni.com/docs. If you are in context help and you click, more details, the default will be to move to the online help. If you're in an offline environment, there's also going to be a way that you can download that locally as well. Question on this side?
That was my question.
Okay.
What about those lists that don't have any access?
Yeah, so that we know that is one of the use cases that we have to support with this. So that again, I think afterwards, let's come up and talk. I want to connect you to the teams. I don't personally know all the details about the offline experience, but I know they're looking at that. So. Okay. So this is great to be in an in-person event. I also wanted to publicize some of the upcoming in-person events for the LabVIEW community. So these are sponsored by NI, but driven, in fact, by some of the folks even in this room here. So upcoming ones here in July is GDevCon North America over July in Golden. So if you want to check out Rocky Mountain National Park on the weekend, I'd make a plug for that. If anybody's here from Europe, or if you're looking to make an international trip, there's GDevCon in Amsterdam in September, and then the GLA Summit also in November. That one is not just in person, but also online. So highly recommend signing up for that. We had over 20 sessions for that one last year. You can also submit a session if there's something you've been working on that you want to share in the community. Highly encourage that. So I'll leave this slide up. I believe that's LN. So take down the information there. I'll give a couple minutes here for last questions. We got about 5 minutes, and then we'll break. And if you have any questions you don't want to ask in the room, feel free to come up. We've got a bunch of folks from NI here that can talk to you. So a couple last minutes for questions. Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, you mentioned the idea exchange. Many of the top-rated items on that idea exchange have been sitting there for years. Is there going to be a renewed interest in kind of responding to those?
Yeah, so great question about the idea exchange. Some of the things there have been sitting for years, even if they're top kudos. How are we going to handle that? So you're right. As we were going through the NXG era, there were some things that we kind of put a pause on because we might be addressing them differently. But that is something that we'd look to add a few of those features every year. You're right, we need to take a look, and either if they've been sitting there for a while, either mark them as we're not going to get to that, or yes, in fact, we're going to bring those in. So that's good. Thank you for bringing it up. Look in a couple of months, hopefully we'll be able to mark a couple of those as complete. But yeah, please continue. We do look at that. Please continue to submit them there. We just probably need to do a little bit more refinement on some of those that came in over the last couple of years. So thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Is the community edition set to follow the same roadmap?
The LabVIEW Community Edition will continue to release bi-yearly, like we're talking about here, and everything that's in LabVIEW Pro is in LabVIEW Community Edition. So yep, great question. That continues to be made available free for non-commercial purposes. So please check that out. Feel free to use it at home. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, one more.
Does creating controls require scripting or DSC module, any of that stuff?
Does creating controls require scripting or DSC? We have not gotten into implementation details on the dynamically creating controls at runtime, but we would intend to make that not tied to DSC, more so for the general environment. But let's talk afterwards to understand your use case. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. It's great to see a full room.